Israel is apologizing for the airstrike that killed 7 aid workers yesterday. The IDF says the strike was a mistake that followed a misidentification, and it's thoroughly investigating the incident.
Meanwhile, Iran continues to threaten retaliation against Israelis for an attack that killed 2 of its generals. Israel's defense chief warns that anyone who hits Israel will pay a heavy price. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
This morning, the IDF chief of staff addressed the tragedy that took the lives of a team of international workers from World Central Kitchen as they returned from an aid delivery in Gaza.
I want to be very clear. The strike was not carried out with the intention of harming WCK aid workers. This incident was a grave mistake. Israel is at a war with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza. We are sorry for the unintentional harm to the members of WCK.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally spoke with some of the leaders of the countries the victims were from.
This happens in war. We're checking this thoroughly. We're in touch with the governments, and we will do everything for this not to happen again.
In the U.S., the White House is expressing outrage over how dangerous it is for aid workers in Gaza.
More than 200 aid workers have been killed in this conflict, making it one of the worst for aid workers in recent history. This incident is emblematic of a larger problem and evidence of why distribution of aid in Gaza has been so challenging.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military continues to prepare for its controversial invasion of Rafah, Hamas's last stronghold, but also temporary home to more than 1 million Gazan refugees. While the Biden administration opposes the invasion, former Vice President Mike Pence says it's a necessity.
Israel has no choice but to invade Rafah and hunt down and destroy Hamas once and for all.
Rather than criticize Israel, Pence said Americans should fully support its war efforts against enemies sworn to wipe it off the map.
If the Palestinians laid down their weapons right now and released all hostages, we'd have peace. But if Israelis laid down their weapons, we'd have no Israel.
On another front, Israel is bracing for Iran retaliating after a top Iranian general and his aide were killed by a missile strike in Syria that's being blamed on Israelis. But Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warns whoever hits Israel will pay a heavy price.
We operate everywhere, every day, in order to prevent our enemies from gaining strength and in order to make it clear to anyone who acts against us, all over the Middle East, that the price for action against Israel will be a heavy one.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, while the world is calling for more aid deliveries to Gaza, Israel says it's doing everything in its power to help more trucks cross the border. Ephraim Graham has more on that story from our CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, as relief groups warn of critical food shortages in Gaza, Israeli officials say the shipments are getting in. CBN's Julie Stahl has this report from the Kerem Shalom border crossing.
Israel insists it is facilitating the movement of goods into the Gaza Strip. Colonel Elad Goren is in charge of the team monitoring and coordinating humanitarian aid deliveries. He says Israel is working to expand delivery and is attempting to do so by adding resources and having staff work longer hours.
Israel is doing everything it can to mitigate the humanitarian consequences of Hamas's action in the Gaza Strip.
The passage behind me leads to the gate to the Gaza Strip. Before the war, there were about 70 food trucks a day going from Kerem Shalom through that gate into Gaza. Now there's about 110 humanitarian aid trucks a day taking food into the Gaza Strip.
In case of who is getting it, there are thousands of people. Hamas is not with uniform. They are civilians. We are moving trucks to the civilians, and the civilians are getting the food, and hopefully that will be a continuous process, mostly with the UN organizations and not other. And I hope that the UN will take responsibility over their steps.
Goren says there's no limit on the amount of aid allowed in and blames any problems on the other side of the crossing. While we could see trucks entering and dropping off goods, piles of supplies waited to be distributed.
Often, there is hundreds of trucks worth of aid waiting on the Gazan side to be picked up. That is the biggest obstacle to aid reaching Gaza in need.
Even so, Goren tells CBN News aid groups keep asking for more without any specifics on how much is truly needed.
Just keep saying more, and it doesn't matter if we will pass 1,000 trucks here and they won't able to collect it, they will say that there's a humanitarian crisis.
Israel maintains 99% of the trucks go through after an inspection. The rest are held back to remove any questionable or harmful materials.
The trucks that are rejected are sent back for repackaging because they contain materials that Hamas can use for their terrorist activities.
These problems aren't new. In 2016, CBN News saw the complex realities of operating the Kerem Shalom crossing. Ami Shaked, coordinator at the time, told us they lived and worked under constant threat of attack.
This crossing point had a bad history with attacks. In 2008, it was totally destroyed by attack of Hamas groups. In 2012, he was attacked by Jihad Global from Egypt, and Egypt is not far away from here, it's 100 meters. And between these things, he was attacked by rockets and mortars from Gaza side.
Shaked also revealed how attempted smuggling of materials for Hamas existed back then.
I can tell you that in the last months, we captured two kinds of important chemicals. Let's say that they're enough for 5,000 rockets.
Israel also claimed Hamas would divert concrete shipments meant for rebuilding Gaza to construct the terrorists' attack tunnels.
We found our cement on tunnels underground inside Gaza.
Despite the obstacles, Israel says it remains committed to getting humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza as the conflict with Hamas continues. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kerem Shalom Crossing, Israel.